Hello and welcome, IELTS test takers. I want to give you 5 very quick tips on things you can do to improve your IELTS listening skills. One of the main things about the IELTS listening test is that information is provided in the form of paraphrases. What do I mean by that? A paraphrase is when you say the same thing with different words. The way it's done in the test is the words that you see are not the same words that you hear. So,
In this listening, instead of type of work, the woman says sort of work. Instead of next to, she says beside. I actually made a list here. Yeah, so she says beside. Instead of extra benefits, she says fringe benefits. And one of the reasons why you're reading extra is because it's more likely that many people will know the word extra, but it's less likely that a less advanced speaker of English will know the word uh, fringe, especially this combination fringe benefits. So, one of the ways they test your English is by giving you terms that wouldn't be so common or that would be considered harder for someone who's learning English. Um, and then they want to test how quickly you can realize that that's the correct term or whether you already know that term. So, yeah, always pay attention to that.
so it's very rare that a correct answer will have the exact same words, and the reason for that is the fact that that's what basic speakers would be able to identify. So it wouldn't really set someone who's got a very high level of English apart from someone who's more basic. Um, the second thing that a lot of people tend to overlook is the alphabet and numbers. The reason why the alphabet and numbers are so important for the test is because um, they will appear on every single thinkable test, sometimes more than once.
If you find the alphabet difficult, one of the things I suggest is you go to YouTube and find lots of things to spell. The reason why they're including this in the test is because here in the UK, the spelling of names of places is very confusing. We have people from all over the world, and people tend to spell things quite quickly. So these are very small things you can do that will improve your grade immensely. So as you can see, we have the alphabet here. I know this person is going to spell something. Every time you practice the alphabet, make sure you practice listening to the alphabet in chunks because that's how the letters are going to appear in your test. So you're going to have the letters all together and there isn't going to be a pause. That can be a bit of a challenge to people.
And another problem is numbers. Make sure you don't get confused when you're hearing numbers because they're going to appear on every single test. Um, and so make sure you revise numbers before you do the test because it is going to be there.
One
So
thing that confuses people a lot is dates. If you learned American English, you would say, for example, October, let's say 22nd. However, in British English, people don't do this, and IELTS is more oriented towards British English, so you won't get dates like that. You will get dates like this: the 22nd of October. 9 times out of 10, when I assigned this task to my students, they wrote 27. And I think the reason for that is because they heard the 22nd of October, so they thought that's probably the number 7, but it's not. It's 22nd of. So make sure you remember that as well, because these questions are always on the test. They look quite simple, but they can trick you.
Now, another thing that's really, really important is predictions. What I mean by predictions is every single thing that is tested in the IELTS exam is supposed to be a skill that you have in real life.
Here, for example, we have a job inquiry, and we see this is for someone to work at a restaurant. So, what practical situation of everyday life is this trying to test my skills for? If you look at this question, you're going to see that it's a question about someone looking for a job. So, what this wants to test is whether, if you came to the UK to live, if you would be able to arrange to have an interview over the phone. Um, so always pay attention to that. If you look at the second one here, it's a form, yeah, but when you look at it, this is a summary of something, and it's saying sports world. So when you listen to this, try and think of what situation in real life you would have that kind of information. So this is providing information about a shop. So I think this could be some kind of advertising, something you would hear on the radio, for example. Um, and then, yeah, you've got questions like that. So here, things about the shop. So this is definitely someone either promoting a shop or something you would hear on the radio or something like that. Try to put what you're listening to in a context that fits in with real life. If you look at this section 3, it's the title of the section is course feedback. So I think this could be something at a university, it could be something at a college. It's a course that people did, and they're giving their opinion about the course. So I think it's very important to look at the questions and think of how they would fit in with real life.
These are things that supposedly will happen in your life once you come to the UK. The reason why all these things happen in the test is because they want to see if you're capable of coping with life in an English speaking country. So when you look at your question, don't just think, oh, okay, it's let's just see what happens. Try and think about what that question is trying to test, what life skill that question is trying to test. And another thing you can do when you look at questions is also try to predict um, what word could fit on that space. I always do that when I see gaps. I think, okay, what word can I put here? And the reason for that is because if you have, let's say, a list of words that you think could be suitable for that gap, it's very likely that you will have activated your schemata, that you will be ready to listen for those words, that you will pay more attention to specific things that could fall, that could fit in that gap. You're always given a few seconds. Make sure you predict what could fit in the gaps.
So you're going to be given some time to have a look at the answers. As I said, if you have a question like this, have a look and think of what word could fit the gap. This will help your brain start organizing ideas so that once a word from a similar category appears, it will go there. A lot of the time when I did that in my head, the word that I needed for the gap was the exact same word I was thinking. Another
Sections 3 and 4 are quite long, and you will have a lot of text to read while you're doing the questions. One of the approaches that I recommend students take to these questions is, instead of reading every single question and all the options in the time that you're given before the track starts to be played, I tell my students to have a go at reading just the questions, and then leave the reading of the options to when the CD is playing. The reason why I like to do that is because if you try to read the question and all the options in full, you will not be able to read the last few questions. That means if you get lost in one of the questions in the middle, say, it's very likely that you will lose an entire section. If you read the questions and you lose one of the questions, at least you will remember what the next question after that one was. So if you can't read fast yet, try reading just the questions.
Another thing to do is if you've got a question, so if you've got something longer, like for example, this one, what students tend to do is read not only the question but also the options. But if you decide to read everything, you're going to see that you're not going to have time unless you read very quickly. One strategy that you can use is instead of reading all the questions and every single one of the options, you can read just the questions. So here, for example, before listening, I would read just the questions. The reason for that is because as I'm listening, I will have an opportunity to read the information that's concerning that question, and I will be able to read this and decide whether this is correct or not. But the problem is, if you've only read the first couple of questions, and you got lost in one of them, it's going to be very difficult for you to know where you stopped. So, a very good strategy is to read all the questions in the couple of seconds that you have before the CD starts playing, and then you can move on. I always make sure, so for example, in a question like that, I always make sure I read. So here, for example, I would certainly read 21, 24. Yeah, I would read 21 and 24. Because if I have no time at all, if this is all I've read, 24 is in the middle. Sorry, it's up to 30. So I would read 21 and 25. Because if I only have a couple of seconds and I couldn't read everything, let's say I lose question 23 and 24. If I remember question 25, it's only two questions that I lost. It's not the entire test. So if you're starting to practice for the test, it's always a good idea to start learning how to read questions like that. Because as I said, it's better to lose one question or two questions than to get completely lost and get a really low score on your test.
Finally, a very important thing you need to do is expose yourself to all kinds of questions that may appear in the test. I'm leaving a link here to a PDF I've created. It's a self-study guide, and it basically features the kind of question, and you can tick a box every time you do a test that has that type of question. The reason why I find that important and useful is because by doing that, you make sure you've covered every single possible question format in the test. And so when you do the test, you're not going to have this random graph of something you've never seen in your life before, and it's something completely unexpected. In my opinion, the IELTS listening test is the most difficult component of the entire exam. It requires a lot of practice, and I think even to a native speaker, it might be really hard to keep up with listening and taking notes at the same time. So if you're finding it difficult, don't get disappointed, don't get frustrated. Remember, it could be just a matter of you getting some practice, getting the hang of it, exposing yourselves to more questions.